Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and I'm here today at the IRCGN, it's the Central Ballistics Lab of the French Gendarmerie, where we are taking a look at some of the really interesting prototype and experimental French small arms that they have in their reference collection. Specifically today, we are looking at this very odd-looking submachine gun. This is made by a company called EROP, E-R-O-P, in the mid-1950s. So this was a private company. One guy essentially came up with this design and wanted to submit it for military testing. Now, this is his 1954 tested short-barreled version, so the magazine goes in here in the grip. The barrel on this one is only yay long. He did also submit and have tested a long-barreled version at the same time, June 1954. Testing came back not so great. For what it's worth, by the way, EROP was a company that was based in Paris, had its headquarters in Paris. Its manufacturing shop was located in the suburb of Courbevoie, which is just to the northwest of Paris. Anyway, a very weird looking gun, square tube receiver, which is not unheard of, but definitely unusual. Let's take a closer look at the inside and how it works. Like many French submachine guns of the post-World War II era, this used modified MP40 magazines. In this case, the over-travel stops have been removed, and then the magazine magazine catch on this gun is located right here. On this example, it's kind of stuck a little bit outward. There we go. So that's the magazine release, which means that on the correct magazine there would be a notch cut somewhere right around here to hold the magazine properly in place. So you may have seen this magazine in a previous video. It's another developmental French modified MP40 mag, but it almost fits. Now, a couple other controls. This is the grip safety, an interesting choice of location for a grip safety. The idea is if you have your grip properly up into the gun, that will depress this lever, which sort of seems to work, but it's definitely kind of an awkward solution. That's the magazine release. We have a fire selector here. That side is semi-auto. That side is full. This is actually a manual bolt hold open, which is kind of interesting. So there's a notch cut in the bolt, which you'll see when we take it apart. And then this just pushes a little spring latch down onto it. So if I open the bolt up, push the button down, and release the bolt, that will hold it open. Non-reciprocating charging handle there. And then to release the bolt, you just pull this back slightly, clicks, and goes forward. There are 4 different sling attachments here. We've got 2 on the back, top and side, and we've got top and side attachments on the front. Now, this is a bit of a mystery. That is most definitely a rear sight, a rear notch sight, but there's no front sight anywhere on the gun. I suspect, although I can't prove, that what's going on here is that this receiver was originally made with a long barrel that had a much longer barrel attached out here and had a front sight on it, and it at some point was, rebuilt as a short-barreled gun. This curved piece here is just a hand stop. I would think you would hold the gun something like that, just to keep your hand from getting out in front of the muzzle brake here. And the stock is also a complete mystery to me. There's checkering on the back of this as if you're supposed to put that up against your shoulder. But if you do that, there is no way that you can actually get your head low enough to use these sights. Maybe there is a different set of sights. Maybe this is missing some elements of a folding stock. Like, I really have no idea what's going on here. And there are no resources out there that do any help in explaining what the purpose of this thing was. All right, that's how it works on the outside. Now let's go ahead and take it apart. We're going to start by removing the spring and bolt, which means I have to lower this lever first. This lever is very tight. There we go. That locks around a ring in this pin. With that down, I can pull this pin out, holding on to the back because the spring is in compression there. Here is the only marking in the entire gun, a number 10 on the bolt plug, the receiver plug. And we can then pull out the bolt and the recoil spring, which is just tensioned onto the back of the bolt. This is rather interesting and unusual because it is striker fired. So that's the striker right there. You can see it protruding out the bolt face. And if I go ahead and pull it back, the striker retracts. And there is a striker spring down inside there. So this is going to work just like a striker fired pistol. Nothing else of particular interest in the bolt. That's the notch that I mentioned earlier that the manual bolt hold open locks into. In the front here we just have a slot on the bottom for the ejector. You've got your extractor there, and then these surfaces pick up cartridge from the magazine. The next step of disassembly is to remove the muzzle device, which unscrews. It's kind of held in place by this bit of a coil spring so that it won't rotate once it's tightened down. There we go. That comes off. It's not like you really need a big flash hider for a 9mm subgun, but that's what they put on there. With that off, we can then slide this guy off the gun. This is just a barrel cover. It's a piece of plain square tubing with the handguard, the sling slot, and then that's the wire spring that basically locks the muzzle device in place. And then I can take off the fire control group. It's got tabs on the front and back. The front tab locks in right there. The rear tab locks under that. So we can pull this off and see the whole fire control group. Before we go deeper into the fire control group, just a quick look at the receiver here. You've got the barrel fixed in place here, and then the receiver is just a relatively small piece of square tubing. There's basically nothing in there. You have an ejector. I'm sorry, you don't even have an ejector. The ejector is in the fire control group. Various elements welded onto the outside, but that's just hollow tube with a barrel in it. All right, and then the fire control group. So what happens here is if the grip safety is depressed, this can drop down. If the grip safety is not depressed, it can't. So basically what's going to happen here is when you pull the trigger, this bar gets pulled backwards. Now, if the bolt is in place, it's not actually going to go backwards. What it's going to do is, as it's being pulled backwards, it's going to be forced downward against these two curved surfaces in the bolt. The striker will be held all the way back here by this element, and so as these get pulled back and down, that drops, which releases the striker, which goes forward and fires. And then up at the front here, this selector is going to allow or disable a semi-auto disconnect. So when you're in semi-auto, after each shot, the trigger is going to reset, and if you're in full auto, it will not. A second set of EROP submachine guns was tested by the French Army in 1956, the designer, of course, hoping to have fixed some of the problems of the first batch. That was not the case. The 1956 test still showed a bunch of problems. The gun fired too fast. We're talking about 800 to 900 rounds per minute. It was not particularly accurate, and it had trouble in both semi-auto and full auto. Apparently in semi-auto, it had trouble with the trigger mechanism. In full auto, it had feed issues with the magazines. It was just kind of all around not a reliable and effective firearm. And of course, at this point, the French Army already had a submachine gun it was quite happy with, that being the MAP 49. So this is the same time there were some other submachine guns that they were testing. Givarm had one that I actually have a separate video on, but nothing quite as odd looking as this gun. Now, the designer died in 1968 or 1969. It's not entirely clear. And when he did, he still had all 20-something of his prototype submachine guns because they were never adopted, obviously, by the French military. And he didn't get any contracts from anyone else. You can kind of see why. None of them were ever sold. And so they were all essentially confiscated by the police after he died. And the ones that still survive today survive in an assortment of different official police collections, like the one here at the IRCGN. So, a big thanks to them for giving me access to this incredibly strange submachine gun to take a look at. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.